and welcome to our next segment of Heathenism 101. I'm Asgard Skegg, and today's segment we are going to be talking about the gods and the goddesses exclusively of the Aesir and the Vanir. Now, we're just going to go ahead, dive right in, and we're going to get started with the Aesir. Now, the first two gods that we're going to be talking about, I like to kind of refer to them as the ancestral gods, because these first two god figures are the progenitors of both races of the Aesir and the Vanir. Everything started with these first two individual gods, and the first one is named Buri. Now, we know from the saga stories that Buri was licked into existence by the sacred cow Edhumla from the icy slag Kvikudrápr that we spoke about in the last segment, creation of the world and the cosmos. So the first god Buri was actually divinely sprouted almost from this Kvikudrápr in the origin story. Now, he had a son, but he did not have a woman, so to say, with the son. His son was born of his own body. So again, it's a very divine style of birth. And Buri named his son Bur. Now, physical-wise, both of these gods are considered to be very majestic, very grandeur, very divine in appearance, and they were very, very, very imposing figures. Now, in the very beginning, we're not talking about the race of the Jotnar in this, but there is some cross over between the Jotnar and some of the births and the children and relationships of some of these that we're going to be talking about today. So the first giant that we're going to bring into the story here is Bestla, and she is the daughter of Ymir, sister of Mimir. Now, Bestla was wed and married to the god Bur, the second ancestor god. And from them, they had 3 sons. In this section of this video, we're only going to be talking about one, and that is the oldest of the 3 sons, and that is Odin. Now, Odin, very, very widely known. We know that he is a warrior god. He is also a god of wisdom and of knowledge. He is a god of oaths. And he is known to be the highest among all of the gods and goddesses within all of the 9 realms. He has a spear, which is called Gungnir, which he takes with him into battle, and the spear is blessed, and it is said, according to the saga stories, that regardless of where Odin throws the spear, it will always hit its mark. It will never miss. Now, we also know that Odin has several animal companions. He has 2 wolves and he has 2 wet ravens. Geri and Freki are his wolves, and the stories say that they are his table companions and that he feeds these wolves from the meat of his banquet table. Although Odin himself does not eat, he sustains himself on mead alone. And then he has 2 ravens, which are named Hugin and Mugen, and in the old stories, the old tongues, that is, Hugin and Mugen means thought and memory. And these 2 ravens sail out and fly the 9 realms every day, and they come back around supper time. And then they whisper into the ears of Odin everything that they saw while they were out there. So this enforces to us the fact that Odin, even in his grand majestic position, Odin is not omnipotent. He does not see all, and he does not hear all. Now, when he is seated on his actual high throne, he is given extended vision to see across the 9 realms, but it's only while he's in that particular seat. Now, Odin has one other animal companion that is very well known of, and that is the 8-legged horse Sleipnir. Now, this horse is so divine that it can actually travel between the individual 9 realms without the use of the Bifrost. And this is significant because most of the other gods require the Bifrost to be able to go anywhere outside of Asgard. Odin's horse Sleipnir is one example of a divine being that is able to go beyond these normal rules that apply to most of the gods. So this is Odin. Now Odin took unto himself a wife, Frigg, who we will talk about more in depth on the Vanir side, and Frigg is the daughter of Vanir, Odin's youngest brother. So these two, Odin and Frigg, had 3 children, and they are the primary deities that we know of the Aesir. And the eldest and the oldest of these sons was Thor. Now again, Thor, very, very well-known figure within the faith. We know him to be the red, fiery-haired god whose temper very closely resembles his fiery hair. He wields the hammer Mjolnir whenever he is in battle, and he has 2 hammers, actually. When he was very young and he was honing his combat skills, he had a stone hammer. And when he came of full age and he came to manhood, he was then gifted the metal hammer that he is traditionally seen in a lot of pictures and such forth like that. Thor also has the ability to travel between realms without the Bifrost, and he does this via his chariot, which is drawn by 2 goats whose names are translated to Nalar and Thrasher. And it is this chariot that allows Thor to travel among the realms, Midgard and Jotunheim being the 2 primary places that he travels to. And he quite frequently throughout the stories and the sagas visits Jotunheim, and he's there most of the times generally just to get into mischief and to start, up his kill count on the giants, basically. Thor also had 2 other magical gifts which helped boost his strength, and that was a magically imbued belt and gloves. And it is said that he actually could not lift his hammer without the gloves that were the accompanying gift. So Thor's hammer was one of the most divine and blessed objects in the faith. His hammer is also said to be so holy that oaths and sacred spaces are blessed with the hammer. Now, Thor's next brother, and actually the other 2 siblings of Thor, were twins, and that is Balder and Hoder. So first we'll talk about Balder. And Balder, another very well-known god within the Norse faith. He's known as the bright and shining one. But Balder was also very, very wise and very, very knowledgeable. It is said in the stories that some disputes in Asgard would go before Balder, and his word was so highly respected that whatever ruling Balder set down amongst in the conflict, that was the ruling that was held to, and no one would dare defy the ruling, because this, of course, was Balder. Balder is also known and is commonly called the favored son of Odin. I personally don't believe this, because there's very, very heavy ties in the Norse family structure where sons have a much more prominent role over daughters when it comes to the mythology of the faith and the gods and their relationships amongst each other. But Balder nonetheless was a very influential god amongst the other gods. It was said that just being in his presence, he emanated this aura which made you instantly happy, and feelings of joy and glee and such forth like this. And so people would constantly want to just be around Balder to share in that feeling and that sensation. Now, Balder's twin brother, Hoder, there's a lot of misconceptions about Hoder out there. And the first one is a lot of people refer to him as the blind god. Hoder is not blind. Hoder is actually most renowned and most well known for his skill in the hunt. He is a master of the bow and the spear, and he's very, very frequently hunting, and he's also skilled at a couple of the general sports, grappling or wrestling being one of those. Now, another prominent aspect of Hoder is he's not overly smart. He's actually, by accounts of the stories, he's actually kind of on the short end of the stick when it comes into intelligence. But an added benefit that he gets from being around his twin brother is that his twin brother's wisdom and knowledge and all of that rubs off onto Hoder whenever the 2 of them were together. So for many of the stories, Hoder and Balder are almost inseparable, except in the case of some period during their upbringing, which Mani actually raised Balder on the moon with him during his upbringing. So those are the primary three Aesir sons. Now, Odin is also known throughout the stories and the tales of being a bit of a player and kind of having relationships with a whole lot of women. And he's very he doesn't distinguish or prejudice when it comes to his partners, because he's, as we're getting ready to see here, he's had several Jotnar females as partners. Now, Odin had two other sons, but they were not born of his union of Frigg. And the first of these gods that we're going to talk about is Tyr. Now, Odin had an affair with Hymir's wife, which I believe her name was Ran. And that union produced the god Tyr. Tyr, another very, very well-known figure within the Norse faith, and prominently because he is known as the one-handed god. We'll circle back to this in a second. So, what we know about Tyr is that he's a warrior god. He's very skilled in combat, and he's very apt on the battlefield. Now, Tyr is also known for being the god of justice and the god of right justice. So Tyr would also have been looked to amongst the gods to help resolve conflicts amongst the gods, and his word would have been very, very highly respected and honored. Now, the biggest thing that we know about Tyr, circling back to his missing arm, is the tale of the binding of the wolf Fenrir. And, this story is really revealing to just how human the gods can be at times, and the story of the binding of the wolf Fenrir is a very good example on this, because everything throughout this entire story, when it comes to Odin, Odin is reacting exclusively out of fear. And this fear is so all-controlling and so enthralling to Odin that he even uses his son to, as leverage to accomplish his end, which is to bind the wolf to hopefully stave off his destiny of being killed in Ragnarok by the wolf's jaws. So he tells Tyr to put his arm in the wolf's mouth to reassure him that there's no trickery going on. But it's very clear that at this point in the story, Odin has a whole lot of trickery going on. He's got, it basically looks like a silk cord, but the thing has been magically crafted by the dwarves and nothing can break it. As a matter of fact, the harder you pull on it, the stronger the cord becomes. So Odin really took advantage of his son's loyalty in this story, and it cost Tyr his arm. But what I find most commendable about Tyr is that he didn't throw it in his father's face afterwards. He just went, shit, my arm's gone, now onwards with business, basically. So Tyr is a very, very honorable character, and he's definitely somebody we want to, embolize ourselves after, because, the idea of individual sacrifice, it's really alien to a lot of people today. And I'm not talking the type of sacrifice of gouging your eye out or, having your arm ripped off. I'm talking about, the individual sacrifices of day to day. Now, the second one son that we're going to talk about from Odin that was not fathered by Frigg, that is the god Vidar. And there's a whole lot less known about Vidar. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest things that we know about Vidar, and Odin had the relationship with the Jotun Gridr, was her name, and then she mothered Vidar. So, but the biggest thing that we know about him is that he is Odin's avenger in the final story of Ragnarok. When Odin is killed by the claws of the giant wolf, it is Vidar who launches onto the battlefield and avenges his fallen father by piercing the wolf's heart with his own sword. So Vidar, not very much known about him, but a very influential story as far as the Ragnarok story goes. So that there is the block of the Aesir. and all of the gods that would fall under the Aesir. Now there's one more god that is considered Aesir, but he is not born of any of the circumstances that we just discussed here, and actually his birth was more divine in nature, like we saw in the birth of the first two ancestor gods, Buri and Bur. And the god that I'm referring to now is Heimdall. Heimdall, as the stories go, was birthed into existence from the sacred fire created by the Grotai Mill. So there are a few different, interpretations as far as Heimdall's parents. It is believed and said that the 9 Jotun maids who push the handles which turn the Grotai mill and create the friction, they are called his mother. So it is also referred that Heimdall had 9 mothers, and they're referring to the Jotun maids who operate the Grotai mill. Now Heimdall is a very wise, very, very knowledgeable, tempered understanding, but he's also very, very warrior-like. In the Ragnarok story, it is Heimdall who finally does in Loki, and Loki gets his final comeuppance, and it was at the sword of Heimdall. Heimdall is also known as the keeper of the Bifrost, and he is the watcher of the gods. So because of Heimdall's birth, really his abilities are so grand, they almost even come as a match to Odin's in an aspect. But Heimdall, though not of the birth of the Aesir gods that we would traditionally see, but divinely born. Another big thing that we know about Heimdall is that after the creation of man, the gods didn't simply, trot back off to Asgard and let us do our thing and figure things out. No, Heimdall actually lived amongst the first humans and was even appointed as their ruler at one point, and there he was known by the name of Rieger. And so Heimdall really had a very large influence in mankind getting on their feet after the creation. So now we're going to bounce down to the Vanir gods, and we discussed Buri and Bur, and Bur and Besla's union in the Aesir section. So the other 2 brothers of Odin that I had mentioned in the first section on the Aesir, those 2 brothers are Vili Lodir and Heathenier. Now, both of these brothers shared a female partner by the name of Nat, and had children on both sides. Heathenier and Nat produced 1 daughter, and first things we know about Heathenier is we know he has large influences in the magical traditions of fertility, but he's also known as the High Godai, the High Priest, the keeper of the sacred blood, and he's also known as the table companion and an advisor of Odin. So with the giant Nat, they had the daughter Frigga. Now Frigga we know as the wife of Odin. She is called the mother of all of the gods. Her ties are very, very heavy in fertility and in the marital union itself. So if someone was wishing to get a partner to marry, Frigga would be the goddess that they would be giving offerings to. Now on the other side, Vili Lodir also had an affair with Nat and had 1 son, whose name was Njord. Now, Njord we know is one of the major gods of the Vanir. He's the god of the sea. He is his hall is Noatan in Vanaheim, but we know him to be a very kind of grisly and kind of cowboy, fisherman, man's man kind of. Definitely not very good looking in appearances. So Vili Lodir and Heathenier both had a son and a daughter. And so now what happens is, again, we're don't have a whole lot of gods and goddesses around. So Njord took his cousin, yes, would be cousin, yes. Njord took his cousin Frigga into his bed, and they had 2 children. which the first was Freyr. And Freyr is also, again, another highly known god, very, very well known, and his ties primarily are to agriculture, to harvest, and to fertility as well. Freyr is known to be accompanied by his wild boar, which he rides. And not a whole lot more on Freyr. We do know that in the final battle, Freyr does try to take on the fire giant Surtr, and isn't very successful, unfortunately. He actually dies. But that's pretty much the extent of what we know of Freyr. Now, his sister, born of Njord and Frigga, is the daughter goddess Freyja, and she is probably one of the 5 most popularly known goddesses within the Norse pantheon, and that is because she's kind of got a lot of hats. She's the goddess of love, she's a goddess of fertility, but she's also a warrior goddess, and she's a warrior goddess, a shield maiden of the battlefield. Freyja is also very commonly known for her abilities and her skills in Cedar, which is a nature elemental based kind of magic that we see very prominently amongst the Vanir. Freyja is accompanied by her 2 cats, which pull her magical chariot. And Freyja is also mostly known because in battle, she receives half of the honored dead to reside in her hall in Folkvanger. So Freyja, very, very prominent goddess within the pantheons as well. Now, we're going to talk about some lesser Aesir, but we're not going to really hit into it too heavily. The largest group that, we're going to talk, large grouping of the Aesir that we're going to talk about are the Valkyrjor, or the Valkyrja, or known in common English as the Valkyrie. These Valkyrie are very, very prominently known within Norse lore, and they are the ones that usher the spirits of the dead to their destination in the afterlife. Be it they get ushered into Asgard, or they have to get taken down to Niflheim to go through the underworld to the place of judgment. But the Valkyrjor are also known as being very beautiful women. All of them are, yes, again, women. Silver, long hair, and they have very, very bright and shining armors. They do carry deadly weapons. They are warriors, as their place is on the battlefield. Now, there are a couple of lesser Aesir that are commonly known that we're going to talk about before we wrap up here. And the first of these greater Aesir is the goddess Idun. Now, what we know about Idun is that she is the keeper of the sacred apples, which are seeded from the mighty ash tree Yggdrasil itself. These apples are then made up into a mead, which she shares with the gods when the gods are starting to feel old and feel tired and feel the toils of age upon them. They will drink this apple mead, and they will be restored to their youthful strength and vitality. So Idun, very, very influential in the operations of Asgard. The next greater Aesir is the goddess Aesir, and we know that she is the greatest of the physicians and healers. If you're having to get a medical procedure done that's a little dicey, you would make offerings to the goddess Aesir to steady and guide the hands of your medical professionals that were doing the work on you. Now, the next Aesir her name is Urdur, and she is a maiden, or she is known as the maiden. All women who die virgins serve her, and she has a lot of close ties and connections working with Freyja. Now, the next one is actually a sister of Freyja, kind of an extended sister, and she is called Fula. And she is not only the sister to Frigga, but she's also her attendant. She takes care of her. It is said she is the keeper of her shoes in the saga. So Fula is kind of the personal attendant to Frigga. The next Aesir is Heathen, and her primary role is to turn the thoughts of men and women towards love towards each other. Lothin, the next Aesir, she is responsible for arranging marital unions. Laur, she listens to the oaths and private arrangements between men and women, and if any oaths are broken, she then seeks vengeance for that broken oath on the behalf of the wronged person. And the last is Hlin, and she is appointed to guard any of those who are considered to be under the protection of Frigg or Frigga. So, as you can see, lots of gods, and this actually wasn't even an inclusive list. There are probably 6 or 8 more of the greater known Aesir that are, their roles are much more minor than the ones that we spoke of today. So, I hope everyone enjoyed this segment today. Our next chapter is going to be on the creation of Asker and Embla, and then we will be reading Heimdall's rune log. So, thank you again for watching in, and until next time, walk always with the gods.